Hey guys, Jason here and welcome to the Abyss Garage, and I have another Shovelhead video for you today. However, it's gonna suck for me. You may be asking yourself, why would you say that? Well, I'm at a point now in this stage of mocking this bike up. I have a lot of the key components already done, tank, seat, fender, you name it. So now we're at the point where it's the little tiny things, the small stuff that is just annoying and you don't want to deal with. I got to figure out a rear axle, what rear axle I'm using. I have to make my own chain adjusters because they don't come with the hardtail kit itself. I even tried to save myself some money and buy a already made oil tank tray, already chromed, and guess what? It doesn't fit. So trying to save myself money and time just cost myself a few hours worth of work. So now I got to take measurements, get some steel, make my own tray. Let's see, I got to figure out a brake light switch, all the little things that you kind of forget about when building a bike. So unfortunately, it's going to stink for me, but hopefully you guys will be along the ride and see how much further along we can get on this build today. So let's get to it. All right, so that last clip you could see me taking off this bracket itself for the brake, and I realized that the brake lever itself was on the wrong side, so we're going to fix that. But this was actually bent, so I actually kind of smacked it a little bit, but I don't have a flat edge or whatever you want to call it, so I'm using the lathe itself to try and not just use this as a reference point. So as you can tell, we're a little high here and obviously here. So just simply gonna place this into the vise itself and then just use a dead blow, whack it a few times, see if we can get it you know, flatter, and then reinstall it. Alright, so I know I sound like a broken record here, or at least I think I sound like a broken record, but I got to figure out this axle situation now. And as I mentioned before a couple times, this is the stock swing arm axle in this bike. I'm using, actually, just for mock-up purposes, the swing arm axle adjusters. They are chamfered on both sides, so I'm not sure about using them. The only other problem is this axle, it sticks out pretty far. Now I know I had to run a spacer on here to actually get enough threads, because I didn't have enough threads to tighten down the axle itself. But obviously you can tap that further and cut some off if you want. So that's a possibility. I have to figure out the spacer width on the hardtail axle, because I had to finagle with things to get everything to work. So that's what I'm going to focus on next. And then once I figure out what axle I'm using, I'm going to try and figure out how to make my own adjusters. And I have an idea, but it really depends on what axle. So let's see if we're figuring this one out. So here's a perfect example of when you're trying to build something and things just don't go quite right. So I was really set on using the hardtail axle and the hardtail axle spacer that I had in the box of parts, and the problem that I ended up running into is that it's meant for like the cast plates, axle plates, and the axle plates, the opening is much wider than the hardtail kit that I had. So you'd almost have to mill it down to next to nothing to act the way it's supposed to, where it's acts as like a slider in a sense. So it just wasn't going to work out for me, and that's just trial and error. So at this point, I've pretty much decided to ditch that hardtail axle, and I'm just going to use the swing arm axle instead. So what I ended up doing was, luckily for me, I had two spacers here in the box of spacers. Milled them out, you know, faced them, made them the same width exactly, milled them to the best of my ability, which isn't a lot. So the plan here is to take this bolt, now I'll get a full threaded bolt later, but take this nut and we're going to weld it onto the frame, and since it's groove, the spacer itself, we're going to fall into place, and then that way I can make my adjustment. So they're pretty much identical, and I think that will be the best bet for this. And then the next thing is to I'm going to have to turn this down a little bit, not a whole lot, but I'll turn the axle down, and then I have a tap, and I will make a little bit more threading, and then I think that should be good. So let's see. That was smart. All right, so unfortunately, I was hoping to check off a little bit more on the list of things to do on the Shovelhead build. Overall, this week in the garage has not been the greatest for me. Between this bike fighting me and my dad's his bike with the frame being cracked, broken, whatever you want to say, it's just hasn't been the best week overall. So you got to take the good with the bad, and I got to look at the positive side of things and say what I did get accomplished. I was able to get the brake pedal figured out because that was bolted on the wrong side. Master cylinder, figure out the brake lines. Fortunately for me, I have brake lines already, so I'll be able to try and save there and not have to, again, put out any money to do that. And the rear, the axle was just a little tedious for me because, I was trying to figure out like, oh, do I do this axle, with the hardtail axle that was in the stash of parts, and trying to make that work, and it wasn't going to work. So honestly, what worked best was just making my own spacers. Took a little bit of time, but again, it didn't cost me anything just to make them, and did a real simple job. I'll get jam nuts on there. Obviously, it's still in the mock-up phase. So overall, I step back and look, and I say, well, I got the brake setup figured out, and I even threw on my own personal PM caliper, 4-piston setup, so it'll stop better than that GMA. And I got a rear axle setup taken care of with adjusters. So, a couple big steps forward, and I'll have to worry about this oil tank tray for another video and some other stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you guys around for another episode in the Abyss Garage. Take care, guys.